Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to our virtual tasting on our 50th anniversary wines. This is so exciting for us because we obviously can only do this year for our 50th anniversary. If you don't know me already, my name is Sarah Rathman. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications here at Dry Creek Vineyard, and I'm thrilled to be able to be here to talk about these wines today. It's going to be absolutely delicious. Couple housekeeping things just to keep in mind for everyone, all the usuals. We're going to keep everyone on mute for right now so that we don't hear any vacuum cleaners and UPS people and dogs barking and all of that good stuff. We also have the live transcription enabled so that if you want to follow along that way, you can enable that button. We are recording this and we will have this up on our YouTube channel so that we can share all this wonderful information with other people, or you can revisit it at a later date as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over. We have two amazing people with us today. We have our winemaker, Tim Bell, and we have our winery president, Kim Wallace. So you've got the best of the best to go with the duos for the 50th anniversary. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them.
Well, hi, everybody. It's good to see so many friendly and familiar faces. Gosh, look at you, Deb. I see everybody, and Sandra and Stephanie, and there's Lee and Eugenia. Wow, look at you guys. Anyway, what a nice group. Hi, Karen. Sorry, you know what? I got to put the right glasses on. That's what the problem is. Okay, now I see everybody. Well, we're really happy that you're joining us today. And, I have to be honest, I'm kind of still pinching myself because I literally got back from France. Oh my gosh, was it 36 hours ago, and spent a bit of time in France, including time in Champagne. And it was just a dream come true. And I am, I have so many things to share, but it's very fitting that we're actually going to be tasting our sparkling Chenin. And I'm really anxious to have it. I haven't tasted it for a little while, so I'm really excited about it. But kind of what Tim and I wanted to do is obviously get into the wines with you and tell you about our, how they're made and taste them with you. But I also wanted to just sort of address kind of why we made these wines. Really, what is the point? What was the inspiration? And, in all honesty, we wanted to create wines that commemorated such a momentous, important occasion, and wines that we had never made before. It's no surprise that everybody knows it's our 50th anniversary. Everybody knows that that's a huge milestone, and that there's just very, very few wineries like us left that can say that they're still family owned. And, there's been no divorces in my family. We haven't killed each other, and the wines have never been better. And so, that milestone really required creating something that was out of the ordinary and really inspirational. And for me, you can't, you have to have something bubbly, right? And so Tim and I talked at length about, okay, we want to make a sparkling wine. We've never made a sparkling wine in the history of this winery, not once in 50 years, which is, kind of unusual. And, the natural approach would have been to do a traditional method champenoise with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and or Meunier, but that didn't feel right to us. And what felt right was taking one of our beloved varietals that we've made for 50 years, Chenin Blanc, and making a sparkling Chenin. And if any of you have ever been to the Loire Valley, you know that they produce still Chenin Blancs and they produce sparkling Chenin Blancs. And so producing a wine that would commemorate this very special occasion, that would really be kind of a signature or reflect the signature style that I think we've become known for, which is that bright acidity and that liveliness and, that sort of touch of minerality and sort of a playful joyfulness seemed like the right approach for this wine. And so that's how we came up with it being Chenin as opposed to, Chardonnay or Pinot Noir. And remember, Tim, when we started talking about this, gosh, it's been, I guess, 5 years ago now. And, one of the things we had to both learn about is Cremants and sparkling Chenins. And we gathered, I don't remember where we got the names of all the sparklers, but we did a bunch of tastings. And Sarah was a part of it, and Tim, of course, and myself, and Brian, our associate winemaker, and a couple of other people. And I would say for maybe a year, we just tasted. right? We just learned about, what style did we like? And it sort of happened pretty quickly, as I recall, that we really liked a style that had a little bit of Cabernet Franc with the Chenin.
Right.
And remember that, Tim? And we had a few people on our sort of tasting committee, if you will, that they weren't accustomed to Cabernet Franc in a Chenin. And so we learned about that. We talked about that. But that's really kind of how we came up with a Cremant. So a Cremant is a term when you're outside of the region of Champagne, you are not legally allowed to call it Champagne, even though we all do. We use the term Champagne very loosely just to mean sparkling wine. But Cremant would be the technical term for when it's not produced in the region of Champagne. And having just spent a week in Champagne, I can tell you those producers are extremely protective of the term Champagne. And they're very proud of it. And there's a lot of similarities too between how I felt, well, what I learned anyway, how the Champagne producers produce their wine and what we did. So I'll be quiet now and let Tim start talking about the wine.
Yeah, so this is a 2019 vintage sparkling wine, and it all starts with the vineyards. So for us, when we decided to do a Cremant de Loire style sparkling wine, Chenin Blanc was going to be the basis of it. So we've been making Chenin Blanc since the very beginning, and for so many years have been working with the Wilson family in the Clarksburg region of California. That's really the premier region for growing Chenin Blanc. So of course we turned to them, and it's in the hands of a younger generation now. David Ogilvie is one of the family members that runs all the vineyards. And so when I talked to him about this project, he was excited about it as well. And, it's a little bit different for them too, because in your handling of fruit for sparkling wine, you want as little juicing as possible. You have to be very gentle. And so we, had to ask them to do some special things in the picking. And there's a bin of the Chenin Blanc that when it came in for the base wine.
I hadn't seen that picture, Tim. That's a really cute picture. I love that.
Yeah, and you can notice that the bin is not completely full. We had them fill it about 2/3 full so that there wasn't a lot of weight of the grapes pushing down on each other. So we had really nice whole clusters. And then we actually did load it whole cluster into our press and just did a very gentle pressing. I'll come back to the processing pieces of it too, but the other aspect was, okay, where are we going to get the Cabernet Franc? And I talked to David at part of the Wilson family down there. Do you have any Cabernet Franc that might work for the sparkling wine? They didn't grow Cabernet Franc. I actually was looking around, and it turned out to be pretty much in our backyard, the source of our Cabernet Franc. And it was from our old friend, Andrew Forchini. And Sarah just put up a photo of Andrew's Cabernet Franc block, a beautiful sort of top of a knoll in their vineyard. You can see it's kind of surrounded by the forest and the hills in the background there in the east in Dry Creek Valley. So we've been getting fruit from Forchini for many years as well, Zinfandel and Cabernet. It's this beautiful eastern bench location, and this little block of Cabernet Franc has really gravelly soil. There's a lot of rocks there. And so we talked to Andrew about it, and he was excited about it too. And so, the whole process of making sparkling wine is so unique and different from, how I'm used to making wine. I did do a harvest at Gloria Ferrer years ago, early in my career. So I had some exposure to sparkling wine, but I'm not, I wouldn't call myself a sparkling wine winemaker. And so
you are too. Now you are.
Now I am. That's right. We did it, and I feel pretty good about what we did.
That's right.
So, the whole thing starts with picking at lower sugars than we would for table wine. So part of that is because you want high acidity, and it's usually a style that you add a little bit of residual sugar at the end. We'll get to that too. So that acid balances out a little bit of that residual sugar. But also you want lower sugar to start with because your base wine needs to be low alcohol because you're going to put the wine through a second fermentation. And so to make the base wine, as I said, we did all whole cluster pressing. We had to put together our own press program. It's again a very different and very gentle, slow moving program, different from what we normally do. And so, in consulting with some other sparkling winemakers, we sort of figured out what we wanted to do. And, I had to sit there and sort of manually load all that information into the press panel. And it ended up being too much for the memory of one of the programs. So we had to break it off into two programs. So we'd run the first program when it stopped, and then we'd start the press again on the second program and finish the whole cycle. But the other part that's really different is all these different cuts you take of the juice. And what that means is sort of looking at how much volume has come out basically on a per ton basis. And then, you send the juice off of one tank or another. So, the lowest pressure juice is called the cuvee, and that's your highest volume of juice. But we were advised, take a little bit of that very first juice that before you start collecting the cuvee, and either put it in your second press cut, which is called the tie, or do some fining and put it back into the cuvee. But we chose to put it into the tie. And then you take a second cut that's called the tie. It's a little bit lower volume. And then the final cut is called your press cut, and that comes at the highest pressures. And the reason you do that is you really want to have low phenolics. So we're already dealing, with Chenin, with white, so it doesn't have a lot of tannin and phenolics in the skins like reds would. But still, you want to be very gentle and light on that. Hey, cheers, everybody.
Cheers,
I see somebody.
yes.
I'm talking a lot, and you want to get to drinking, don't you?
Yeah, I agree.
But anyhow, so go through that press program. We had all these, we had to rent some small portable tanks with refrigeration jackets on them to be able to do these small press cuts. Went through the whole process, fermented all these different wines, and then we took all the different press cuts to some other sparkling winemakers that we were consulting with, and we worked on blending the final base blend. I should mention too that one thing we tried, which is with the Chenin Blanc, we fermented a little bit of it in an acacia barrel. It might have even had 2 acacia barrels, and we were going to see just does that work as part of the cuvee. We ended up not liking that so much, but we settled on was all stainless steel fermentation with both of the Chenin and the Cabernet Franc, and it's 87% Chenin Blanc and 13% Cabernet Franc. And of course, you don't really get much of color, really any color from the Cabernet Franc, because we're treating it just like white grapes. It goes right in the press, gets pressed right away, separate the juice from the skins, and then as it goes through the process, any little tiny tinge of color it's gotten is lost. So you really end up with another white wine. And then the next steps in the process are you take the base wine, you put it into the bottle, you add some yeast and sugar, and that process is called the tirage. And the bottle gets a little crown cap. It looks like a soda pop cap, basically, or a beer bottle cap on the wine, and you go through a second fermentation in the bottle, and you add just the right amount of yeast to get to a certain level of alcohol in the wine. After you've done that, then you've got all the yeast in the bottle, and you're aging the bottle on the yeast. And so, you could do, less than a year or several years. That's another stylistic choice. So we wanted to get a little bit of that yeasty character, but still have a pretty fresh style wine. So we left the wine on the yeast for 20 months total. And these are some bottles in probably some caves somewhere in Champagne or something.
These are photos that I took 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the one on the left, or my screen on the left, is actually from Paillard, a very famous producer, and the one on the right is from Henriot. But I thought I thought it was appropriate for our tasting today because it shows you how, kind of how much what the dead yeast cells look like, in the bottle. And then I think we have some. I know you're going to explain what riddling is, but I think I gave Sarah some photographs of riddling too.
Right. Yeah, so that little bit of cloudiness in the photos is the yeast that's, and that yeast breaks down over time and releases some amino acids, and it adds some flavor components that wouldn't be there otherwise. And so at the end of this process, when you're getting close to wanting to remove the yeast from the bottle, then you start, the bottles go through a process called riddling. And traditionally, it would be here. I don't know where that's from, Kim, but those are.
That is, I think that's also at Henriot, and it's hard to see from the photograph, but this is a, you know, and every champagne house does it a little bit differently, but this is the old fashioned way where they're hand riddled, and there's actually a person that comes by and turns the bottles, you know, at like a quarter of a turn. And they had a way of marking them so that they would remember where they were, where they left off. It was fascinating. And of course, they've been doing this for, you know, centuries. And then a more contemporary riddling machine is used by many of the top producers. And that's what we used. And that is actually kind of these large, like crates, if you will. The bottles are inside of them. And every so often they turn a switch and it essentially jiggles the wine, and you know, you're standing in the cellar and you can actually hear, you know, thousands of bottles jiggling like you know, for just maybe 10 seconds, and they do that over a period of time to as opposed to the hand riddling racks. And actually, if any of you guys have been to the winery recently, you've seen in our barrel room in the cellar, I have some old riddling racks hanging on the wall as kind of decoration, but this is how they do it nowadays.
Yeah, and the whole goal of that process of riddling is to get the yeast sediment to slowly move down to the neck of the bottle. So that's why the traditional riddling racks have the bottles neck down. You want to collect it all down there near the opening of the bottle. And then the next step of the process is called disgorging. And that's where you remove the yeast from the bottle. And I don't know how they ever came up with the method they use, but it's pretty amazing. So they'll put the bottles neck down in this solution. It's like a brine solution that is cooled to very cold temperatures, and it freezes the neck, the wine in the neck of the bottle. So it has to be very, very cold because you know, with the alcohol in the wine, the freezing point is lower. I guess it takes a colder temperature to freeze that. So these bottles, and it's typically all automated now these days. So the bottle's next freezes, then it goes into a piece of machinery that pops off the crown cap, and when it's going through that, you just hear this constant pop, 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 pop. And what is happening is the pressure of the CO2 in the bottle that's built up because you've trapped all that CO2 and given it the wonderful bubbles that we enjoy. That's actually bursting out that little plug, frozen plug of yeast. And then you top off the bottle with a combination of what's called the dosage. So it can be anywhere from just a sugar water solution to a sugar and wine solution, or sugar and brandy, you know, different combinations. Again, another stylistic tool that can really shape how you want the wine to taste in the end. And then they'll also take other bottles of the wine and just siphon a little bit of wine out of there to complete topping the bottle. It gets the cork, gets the the crown cap and the foil and the label and the whole business, and you're ready to go. And so we went through a process of trying to determine what our dosage was going to be too, what our sugar level was going to be. Kim was a part of that tasting. Brian, of course. I think Laura who works in our lab, who's part of our blending team, she was a part of that. And we looked at all these different levels, and we ended up zeroing in on about 5 grams per liter, which is 0.5%. So by point of comparison, our dry Chenin Blanc table wine is usually somewhere around 0.4%. So it was very close actually to what that dry Chenin Blanc table wine is with residual sugar. But we didn't use just a simple sugar solution. We ended up using some 2020 Chenin Blanc that we had saved in some stainless barrels, basically stainless drums, so it didn't get any wood or oak on it. And that was a part of the blend, and we really liked how that came out. So, just before we got on here, I was tasting the wine again, and I was getting some really nice floral notes and a little bit of almost flinty quality. And in the flavor, I was getting some really nice honeydew and maybe a hint of strawberry. And I think that Cabernet Franc brings a little bit of subtle red fruit in there. And what's typical for our Chenin Blanc is kind of a fresh cucumber or almost even a watermelon rind quality that is really refreshing. And I get all of that in here too. And it was a lot of work and a lot of research, and very satisfying in the end to be able to bring this to you.
Well, it's funny when I was in Champagne, of course, I was, learning about how they produce these wines there. And there's a lot of discussion about the dosage level, the sugar level, and essentially 0 or 6% grams and less is considered brut, or you can also call it extra brut. So I remember texting Tim because I could not remember, was ours 5, was it 6? And then, some of the producers are actually doing what they call a 0 dosage. So 0, 0% sugar. But what's interesting is in Champagne, and unlike here, they actually grow, they use beetroot. So they're growing the beet sugar to use for this process. We obviously didn't grow beets for this. I suppose we could try that for our 100th anniversary wine. But I also wanted to just point out that, one of the things that I think is really similar to Dry Creek Vineyard's approach, I found anyway in France, or in Champagne, I should say, is there's a tremendous emphasis on the relationship between the winemaker or the winery and the grower. So that it's all about the growers in Champagne. And, there are something like 80% of the, actually wrote it down because I wanted to tell you guys this. So the houses would be like a winery. So the houses own 20% of the land and the growers own 80% of the land. But the houses make 80% of the champagne and the growers only make 20% of the champagne. And I visited, some top houses. So it was just, there's a tremendous, partnership or symbiotic relationship with the growers. And of course, that's very much our philosophy here at the winery. You, of course, know we have our own estate vineyards. They're very important to us. But we also have really, really important partnerships with very, very long-term growers. And the two that Tim mentioned have been part of my family for many, many, many decades. And so it's very fitting that, because some people have asked, well, should it have been an estate bottled wine? No, there's no need for that. It doesn't make it any better. So the other thing that's interesting about in Champagne, when you're learning about Champagne, is they never talk about how it tastes or smells. It's very interesting. So we're so accustomed to, pontificating about how something tastes and smells. Tim was just sharing some of the adjectives that come to mind when he's smelling and tasting this wine. And, we do it all the time. I think you probably find that you do it with your friends, but it's very interesting. In Champagne, virtually not one person talked or told us what the wine would tasted like, because they feel that it's so individual and it's so differentiated by the cuisine. And of course, in Champagne, they drink champagne with all the entire meal. So it isn't just like we're right now having it as an aperitif. Maybe some of you are having it before your dinner, or maybe you'll have it as a first course. And that's, I think, generally how we are accustomed to having sparkling wine in this country. But in Champagne, they'll have it as the first course, and then they'll serve it as an entree with the entree, and they'll serve it with a, like a lighter, well, obviously a fish, but even a light white meat, pork, maybe some duck or rabbit. And so it was the first time that I've experienced pretty much having champagne morning, noon, and night. And it was fun, I have to admit.
What I think is very fascinating to me is just how in this champagne process, each little bottle is basically its own little fermenter. It's its own little tank.
That's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah, and it's just such a handmade process. And so I guess it was fitting that we continued that when we labeled this wine and labeled it as well.
Yeah, this label, well, let me put it to you this way, everybody. I promised him that we would never do this ever, ever, ever again. But of course, I reserved the right to change my mind, right? This label was a true labor of love. And it was inspired by, actually years ago, a friend of mine sent me a copy of a label, and they're called pewter labels. They're handmade in France. And I remember thinking at the time they were so gorgeous. And someday I wanted to design a label with that pewter label as opposed to a paper label. And so I've worked with the same graphic designer, a fellow named Tony Austin, for gosh, at least 20 years now, maybe longer. And so the same illustrator that created some of the illustrations we use on our other labels designed this. And you know, it's all hand lettered, all hand labeled. We obviously wanted it to have kind of a nautical flair. And the signal flags on the label they actually are the numerals 1972, you know, the year we were founded. And, you know, we spent a lot of time figuring out what we wanted this label to communicate and how we wanted to symbolize the brand. And, you know, the lines, or, you know, they look like ropes, kind of symbolize the strength as well as the nautical side of our business. Obviously, you have the sailboat, but I give you a little funny little thing that you probably are the only people in our wine club who will learn this, and you can't tell anybody, it's top secret. So if you look really closely at this photograph, or if you happen to have a bottle and you look in the sail, on the sail, you'll see 3 little letters. Does anybody see those? Maybe, yeah? Do you see what the letters are? Well, I'm going to tell you it's 50 fabulous years. I'm not going to tell you what I really said when we came up with the idea. It's another F word and I won't use it. But in fact, that's what it was. And I wanted to put that in there just as, you know, to celebrate our 50 fabulous years of, you know, 50 years of trials and tribulations and, you know, thriving, surviving, celebrating, etc. And so those little 3 letters are obviously just are my own little goofy way of having fun and putting kind of like a Where's Waldo kind of element into our packaging. But anyway, and then the labels, of course, had to all be applied by hand, which drove Tim and the team totally crazy. Same thing with the Cabernet. I think that took over 2 weeks just to apply those labels alone. And it was a tremendous amount of work. But, you know, you only turn 50 once, right? So.
Right.
Well, everyone's being really quiet in the
I know.
chat. Are there any questions you guys want to ask before we move to the 50th anniversary Cabernet? If so, this is definitely the time. I see some people leaning in, but otherwise we'll go. Oh, Stephanie, are you writing something? Perfect. We'll hang on here and see.
What is everybody eating right now? I see some chewing or munching faces. Anybody having foie gras?
Perfect. So the question from Stephanie, how many cases did you make? We actually put that right on the neck label, didn't we, on the back of it?
We did. Is it 275? Gosh, I don't have it in front of me. Do you remember, Tim? Somebody, yeah, look on your label. It's on the neck wrap.
Over 400, about 400 something.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's right. That's right. Because I remember at the last minute, Tim told me we had a different blend we liked better, remember? So we lost some, about 100 cases, as I recall.
It was going to be bigger, but in the sacrifice for quality, top quality,
Yes. Yes.
we made less.
Yes. And we've been asked, you know, is there another vintage? And so far the answer is no. And this is a vintage sparkling wine, a vintage Cremant. I think if I'm recalling correctly, I think it has to be over 15 months to be considered a vintage champagne, but I don't quote me on that. It's either 15 months or I think it's 15 months. And this is, I don't know, 20 months of aging.
Yeah, 20 months on the entourage. Yeah.
And of course, one of the differences with the way this wine was produced than sort of traditional, you know, champagne is that most champagnes are non-vintage and they always blend, you know, depends on the house, anywhere from, you know, 6 years back. They always have the same vintage, but then they're blending back vintages. And in some cases, in the really, really, really fine champagne, you know, some of them include wines from 15 years ago. And it was fascinating to hear how the winemakers hang on to those wines. So there's, in theory, a little bit of every, of the vintage in every vintage and every non-vintage.
Oh, I got a really good question from Gary and Karen, the Prestons, saying, we mentioned sugar beets. Is it just a coincidence that sugar beets was the main crop in Clarksburg historically?
Wow, that's totally, I think, a coincidence.
Does that crop still influence the grapes grown there?
I have to be honest, I didn't know they grew sugar beets in Clarksburg, and I haven't come across those, but I'm usually going there to visit grapes, so I probably missed something.
Well, now you have a new assignment the next time you go.
Right.
Well, so Bruce had a good suggestion to have a little group cheers before we move on to the 50th anniversary Cabernet. So raise your
Cheers.
glass, a little cheers to the 50th anniversary.
Cheers, cheers, cheers.
Love it. So yeah, you guys, we can move on to the 50th anniversary Cabernet. I mean, you can keep drinking sparkling. I will never tell you to not drink sparkling, but we can start talking about the 50th anniversary Cabernet.
Well, and just before you go into it, Tim, again, so this, what we really wanted was something that would be really noteworthy and really age-worthy, and also just very something that would be, how do I say, there's something that's sort of reflective of who we are as a family. It's sort of like reflective of our values. And it sounds sort of woo-hooey or esoteric, but that's really what we're trying to do when we create these one-of-a-kind wines. They're the heart, they are reflective of every gray hair, wrinkle that any of us who are involved in this winery have earned over the course of our lifetimes. And that's really how I see these wines, as like literally, liquid embodiments of this place, this fabulous, region, this plot of land, this site that we've been blessed to, be on and here for 50 years. And that to me is that's what inspired me to want to try to produce something like this. Tim, maybe you should talk about how, when your boss comes to you and says something like that, how do you turn that into a wine?
Well, it was something that, it didn't take this lightly at all, because it was, 50th anniversary seemed like just a really important occasion to commemorate. And, we did, 5 years ago, a 45th anniversary Cabernet blend. And we put a lot of effort into that, but somehow 45 just didn't seem like quite as significant, even though it's pretty amazing in itself. So, we really started with vineyards, what's going to be the source of the best possible fruit for this wine. And so, we turned to a lot of our old friends, I would say. So, certainly our Endeavor Vineyard, there's a bit of that in this blend. And then close by to the Endeavor Vineyard is Puma Springs. So our friends, the Tony Crabb and Barbara Grasecci, grow some beautiful Cabernet there as well. And then, so that's in the area that we call the alluvial gap, or the Lytton Springs area of Dry Creek Valley. So it's kind of the southeastern part of the valley, very different soils, a little bit warmer. You get some really big, rich Cabernet. Going to another part of the valley, the western slopes, we turned to Triple Z. So this is a vineyard that we bought off and on from, but we've developed a new relationship with the Jones family that owns this vineyard. And they've got two sons that are very devoted to caring for this vineyard. And it's a hillside vineyard, the west side of the valley. And the main part of the Cabernet that we use from that comes from a very small block of some old vines that have very low production, but just produce really concentrated fruit. It's just beautiful. And along with that is a lot of times you may have heard of Mercer Golden. So that's been a vineyard that we've produced Cabernet from in the western hills of Dry Creek Valley as well. And then kind of the last major region is the Eastern Bench, that is our benchland meritage. And we've got two old friends there. So the Forkinis and the Cabernet that we grow from them, and also the Walcott family we've been buying grapes from for such a long time, and beautiful Cabernet on these nice rolling hills with good gravelly soil. So that really kind of was the heart of the blend. We actually tried another grower too in 2019 that we had bought fruit from, and I won't say their name because they didn't make the blend. It looked like a really good site, but you know, it just wasn't as good as some of our old friends here. And so I wanted to make a wine that was, you know, rich, full, had aging potential, but also some elegance. And you know, in the end, kind of reflecting our desire to follow the Bordeaux model of blending. So it's, you know, 78% Cabernet, and then we've got 10% Petit Verdot, and there's 5% each of Malbec and Merlot, and then just a couple percent of Cabernet Franc. The Malbec and the Cabernet Franc is the only vineyard I haven't mentioned yet, and that's DCV6, which is right here next to the winery. And as you know, many of you know, is a source of some beautiful Malbec and Cab Franc that we bottle on its own, and also use in the Mariner blend from time to time. But so we really, you know, a lot of these bigger vineyards, the bigger Cabernet vineyards, we picked very select blocks for this. But I didn't want to stop there, so we thought about what can we do as we ferment this wine that will make something special for this blend. So from Forchini, we actually sourced some Petit Verdot, additional Petit Verdot beyond what we normally get, and we did a co-fermentation of the Forchini Cabernet and Petit Verdot, and it turned out to be just this really beautiful, rich, dark red wine. And then we also did a co-fermentation of some of the Petit Verdot from the Endeavor vineyard with the Cab from that vineyard, but at a much lower percentage than what we did with Forchini. The Forchini, I think it was something like, you know, 52% Cab and 48% Petit Verdot. And with the Endeavor vineyard, it was more like maybe 12% Petit Verdot and the rest was all Cabernet. But we also fermented some of that in oak puncheons. So this is a bigger than normal sized barrel. So normal oak barrels, there we go. That's the actual barrel that we fermented this special lot from Endeavor Vineyard. So the you know, normal size barrel is about 225 liters or close to 60 gallons, and these puncheons are 500 liters. So they're a bigger barrel. And what we actually did was, gosh, I don't know why it doesn't look like it's got shot with bullets in real life, but that looks like it.
I know. I was gonna. You read my mind. I was just thinking you took that picture. That's. It looks like
I
it
did.
was clawed. Oh, you did?
Yeah, Tim took that one for me.
Oh gosh.
But this is a French oak barrel from one of my favorite coopers in France, Quintessence. They just make beautiful barrels that go great with the Cabernet and Petit Verdot, all the Bordeaux reds. And we actually put these barrels on end, removed the head, it's that round piece at the end of the barrel there, and turned it into a little open top fermenter. And then we filled it with this blend of grapes and did hand punch downs. And so it was a very much hands-on, labor-intensive, sort of labor of love kind of winemaking. And in the end, when we press it out, we have to kind of tip the barrel. We get it up on a forklift and tip it into bins, put the grapes into the press, and then we end up putting the head back on the barrel so it can be a container again. And we aged the wine that fermented in it in that barrel. So it has this sort of beautiful integration, and it was brand new oak, so we got some early integration of oak and built some nice structure into the wine as well. So things like that, and then we did some longer skin contact with some of the Cabernet lots. So I think we were up over a little over 20 days, like 20 to 22 days, something like that. So a little bit extended time on the skins to, again, maybe build some structure and tannin, but also just a different flavor profile, a little bit more savory, a little bit slightly more mature, and it gives you a lot of, you know, kind of a broader palette of ingredients basically to put together in this final blend. And so in the end, it was 45% new oak. Most of that was French. We had a tiny bit of European oak or Hungarian oak, and a tiny bit of American oak. And I know we used maybe a lot of more American oak in the early days of the winery, so having a little bit in there for the 50th anniversary seemed appropriate. And yeah, in the end, I really like I get some nice boysenberry. some chocolate notes, a little touch of cedar, some baking spices, and the wine is with a little bit of time in the bottle has just become very round and slightly silky, and balanced tannins. So really, I think a really nice mouthful of Cabernet, but in the end, it's kind of more of a seamless Bordeaux style blend that's heavily accented with Cabernet.
Well done, Mr. Bell.
Thank you.
Does anybody smell? I don't know if it's just me, but I smell there's a certain variety of basil that has a minty, there's almost like a spearminty mint basil variety, and I forget what it's called. Does anybody, when you pick it, it just has this beautiful aromatic. And I keep smelling that. I don't know what, and I don't know the variety. Do you know, Sarah, you're a gardener. Do you know what that is? Have you planted your basil yet?
I haven't this year, but no, I don't, I'm not familiar. I use a lot of lemon basil and thyme basil and lime basil and purple basil, but I haven't had a minty one. So I'll have to go check it out.
I don't know what it is.
Did you want to share some inspiration from the label for this one? Because this
Well,
one is also quite a.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, so the artist is really the one who gets all the credit in the sense that he was able to capture, this is sort of telling our story over the period of 50 years, right? And in fact, at one point, the illustration that he used and it was a cool idea, but I said, no, I don't want to be sued on my 50th anniversary. And he actually had an illustration of the America's Cup, the actual cup from the America's Cup. So, the trophy. And I know that is a highly prized emblem, if you will, that one does not use without permission. So I said, nope, take that off. And we decided to go with our, with our sailboat, and of course our picture of the winery, and it's got the tower. I think we even have we have the weather vane on the top of the tower there. And so we just tried to sort of capture the look and feel of the winery and some of the elements that have tied us, together over the years. I love it. I think it makes me sad. I've been talking to Sarah about how can we use this illustration, for something else beyond this year. I think it would make a fabulous t-shirt. And I know she's got plans to use it for different types of collateral or point of sale materials, because it's just such a beautiful illustration. Yeah, it would make a great t-shirt. I know. We should make sure that Paige has got that on her list of things to do, because we have some new 50th anniversary swag coming out in the tasting room, but I can't remember if we decided this t-shirt would or this illustration would be good on a t-shirt, but I think it would be. And again, all hand applied. Poor Tim. I know, it's a lot of work. So.
Well, and hand patina, remember
Oh, yeah.
Going to
my gosh,
the level of patina on there. I mean,
oh, that's right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we kept getting, so we had a sample of a color that I wanted, right? And it needed to be gold, but it couldn't be too shiny gold and too brassy, and it couldn't be too dark. And anyway, the way they produce these labels, they put the patina over it and then they rub it off literally with cloths. Now this is happening in the south of France, in the Basque region, where the producer is. It's a father and son producer, if you can believe it. And then they were being shipped to the winery, and we would have to approve them. And we went through probably 4 of them, Sarah. And you're trying to do this, they don't speak French. We're trying to do it with a language barrier, and we also had a very tight time frame because Tim wanted to label it, and we needed to release the wine. So eventually we got it just the way we wanted it, but it was really kind of a pain in the neck, and we ended up rejecting, oh my God, an entire palette of labels, and because they were so dark and sort of dreary looking and didn't convey what I was looking for. So this is the way we wanted it to look, and it took some time and effort, but I think it's a really beautiful package, and I think it's something that would look beautiful on your dinner table. It'll be hopefully something you can proudly store in your cellar, and when you pull it out in 10 or 20 years or whenever you decide to drink it, the label will be equally as beautiful. It won't disintegrate over time and get all sort of moldy like a paper label will.
Great. Well, does anyone have any questions on that? This is like the quietest virtual tasting we've ever had. Usually there's a million different questions on this. I know somebody's going to
Maybe
ask
somebody has
usually
jet
how
lag.
it age. Yeah, how long does this age is usually one of the questions. What would you pair it with? So Tim, if you have any ideas on either foods to pair it with or kind of how long you could hang on to this, I'm sure that everybody would love to hear that.
Well, just tasting it today, I would say I tend to like red wines with a little bit of youth still and some freshness of fruit. So, I might personally age this another 5-6 years at proper cellar temperatures and start enjoying it. But, I think another good 10, 12, maybe even 15 years is certainly within the realm of possibility. One thing in its favor is that it was a relatively cool vintage, 2019. 2018 was sort of similar also, but 2019 was kind of a cooler vintage, but had some bigger, richer wines. So kind of this nice balance, between sort of extremes. Like 2017 was a warm vintage, so very opulent, upfront, almost decadent wines. 2019, this vintage is not quite that. But what I'm saying is that cooler vintage does preserve some acidity, which is really a key to aging. It's really about acid and pH. And some good tannic structure that makes the wine age. Gosh, and in terms of food pairing, I want to hear what Kim has to say, but I just think of, I could see anything from like sitting around and having some nice, really blue vein cheese to go with it, or something with maybe some nice mushrooms in it as well, some really beautiful, sauteed, cooked down mushrooms or something like that. And certainly, I don't know. I could. It certainly would go good with steak, but I think maybe something more like a roast, like a pot roast, might be for me, and even a roast chicken. I think. I don't know. What do you think, Kim?
Well, I've got, like I said, I had French food on my mind for the last couple of weeks. Beef bourguignon,
Yeah.
maybe even something like, well, what about even like a cassoulet? Something like that made with maybe with pork or duck. I don't know, but I think something fairly hearty. But I wouldn't serve it with Italian food. That's just me. I wouldn't serve it with Italian food. But I think pretty much any other, savory. I mean, I actually think a really beautiful porterhouse, pan fried with maybe some thyme or some rosemary, like really simple with butter, just uber simple. And then maybe with those, some morels. Right now it's morel season in France. So I had a lot of morels and oh my gosh, they're just the best. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, if no one has any questions, do you guys have any final thoughts for the group as far as 50th anniversary or anything else you want to share, Tim, about how so far the harvest is, or the crop is looking so far this year, how our blooms are going? Anything else?
Well, so we're right now in fruit set or bloom. So that's kind of one of the last final important steps to determining our crop size. But I will say that I've been hearing from growers higher bunch counts this year, so more bunches on the vines than maybe in the last few years. So that might point towards a little bit more abundant crop. Although a few select places have suffered some frost damage. So that might be balanced out for some vineyards, but most of them have come through pretty well. So, we're still in a drought year, so that may mitigate some of nature's bounty as well, maybe cut down on it a little bit. So there's, you just don't know until you bring it across the scale what you're really going to get.
I always forget, but what does Matt Vogensen always tell us? It's 100 days. You know how he has a formula for the number of days from fruit set to veraison. What are the number of days? Do you remember?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
no.
I don't either. I know. I need to ask him again because Sarah, do you remember?
I don't. Yeah, same thing. I don't remember. We think about it once a year.
I
And then
know.
we forget it by the time the next year comes.
I know,
around,
we're all
because we have a
getting
few things
older.
happening in between.
I know, it's very true.
Well,
Anyway,
speaking
well-
of that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody. I know we're going to see some of you in about a month from now, which is just exciting. And I don't know who, if anybody's coming to our library tasting, but we're doing a live. Oh, great. Okay. It'll be fun to see you. So that'll be really a fun time to taste some of, really get into how do our wines age, because we've got some really lovely, significantly older wines that we're going to be tasting with everybody. But I'm just excited to see everyone, and want you to know that, we wouldn't have made it to 50 years without all of you. So you're deeply, deeply appreciated. And we will be kicking up our heels and celebrating. And if you're with us, we'll do it together. And if you're not with us, you will all be in my heart, and I'll be thinking of you. So have a good evening wherever you are. And I'm going to go home and go to bed really soon because I haven't slept. And anyway, thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.
Great to see all of you.
We're going to take a little break on virtual tastings for the next couple months, since we have a few little events coming on about the 50th anniversary, but we'll let you know where we are. In the meantime, if you want to schedule a private virtual tasting, we have those on our website. You can schedule some time with Darren and he can walk you through some of your favorite wines. So just reach out to us. We always want to be around. We always want to have you in our lives. So let us know how we can be a part of your lives. And again, like Kim said, we'll see a lot of you here in about a month. So have a great night, be safe, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Right?